You do not have to pinch yourself. This is not a dream. We have a doubleheader on Monday Night Football. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Green Dot Daily Live from the Tommy John studio in New York City. I am your host, Charlie DiSturco, and as you'd expect, it's a football-only show today. Can Trevor Lawrence and the winless Jags head into Buffalo and dethrone the red-hot Buffalo Bills? How about Joe Burrow and the winless Bengals finally getting one home against the Washington Commanders? We'll break down both those games with Sean Koerner and Nick Giffen in just a sec. Plus, we'll get their favorite props in each game. You do not want to miss that. Gilles Gallant and I enter four-down territory for this doubleheader, and Billy Ward joins me to make an SGP for the Washington and Cincy game. And yes, we are getting tropical on this Monday. A red-eye to Mykonos has been scheduled for Koerner, Nick, Gilles, and myself as we head to the island for Jaguars Bills. But before all that, let's take a look at how the market stands entering this doubleheader. And no surprises here, both the favorites have taken in the majority of the bets. We've seen sharp money come in on Jacksonville, moving this line from +6 earlier in the week to as low as 4.5 at some spots. The Bengals remain steadfast at just over a touchdown favorite with over 70% of the bets and handle on Cincy. Another unsurprising feat, the over has taken in the majority of the handle. Bettors are hoping for some fireworks after a pretty low-scoring Sunday, which brings me right into my question for Nick Giffen. Sean Koerner also joining me. We're going to get your props in just a sec, but Nick, you know, we're talking luck rankings all week. This happens to be a luck rankings game as well. We've kind of seen the money come in from the Jags, 6 down to, 5.5, 4.5, depending where you look. What are you seeing here when it comes to the luck rankings?
Yeah, well, of the 7 luck rankings games this week, this is the second highest luck gap at 81.5%. The only one that was higher was that Broncos game, which not only did the Broncos cover, they won by a lot against Tampa Bay. So this is the second highest luck gap of the week. And unlucky teams in games with a luck gap above 50% in week 3 are 25-13 against the spread. So that's 65.8%. So despite the luck rankings only being 2 and 3 this week, if both games, because the other one is a luck rankings game as well, if both unlucky teams cover tonight, it'll still be a positive week for the luck rankings. But it's the long term, right? You're going to have some weeks where they don't win, and then you'll have some weeks where they win. But overall, close to 66% in week 3 in the history of the luck rankings.
Love to hear that. And obviously you've seen the money. The sharp money has come in on Jacksonville as well. Could there be a bounce back? We've seen, not a great start out of the Jags, vice versa. The Bills undefeated to date. All right, Sean, you're up first for your prop on this Monday Night Football. We're going to start Jags, Buffalo. Where are you headed?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Dalton Kincaid under 37.5 receiving yards. He's off to a bit of a slow start this year. He's failed to clear this number in both games. And while I think, eventually he's going to break out, I'm still showing value on his under here just based on this matchup. The Bills, they've been a very run-heavy team ever since Joe Brady took over as offensive coordinator. So I'm expecting that to continue here. And even when Josh Allen does drop back to pass, he's always a threat to scramble, which obviously takes away from potential passing attempts. But the Jaguars, they use man coverage at the highest rate so far this year. And whenever Josh Allen faces man coverage, he's more likely to scramble throughout his career. So I think that's going to be the case tonight, where we're going to see him lean on his legs a bit more. Kincaid, throughout his career, he averages, his target rate is 4% lower against man coverage, and he averages 0.64 yards per route run against man coverage. And when he does see targets this year, it's not far downfield. In fact, it's minus 0.3 yards downfield. So even if he gets a handful of targets in that range, it's going to be hard to really clear this number. And the Jags defense is perfectly equipped to handle those types of routes. They've allowed the 3rd fewest yards per play on pass attempts 10 yards or less. So this sets up as a tough matchup for Kincaid to really rack up yards. So I'm projecting him closer to 30.5 receiving yards here, with about a 63% chance he stays under 37.5.
It's been a really tough season for tight ends in general. Travis Kelce hasn't seemed to gotten off his feet. Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid also in that group. I'll tell you what, Sean, other than Dalton Kincaid, I'm pretty sure my fantasy team's upset by you saying this, because I need a day from Kincaid, ETN and Zach Moss. So hopefully, maybe a couple touchdowns staying under this prop is fine by me. So that's what I'm going to be rooting for. But not so good. You're making me a little steamy here because I hope my fantasy team can take home the Week 3 win. But Nick, you're up next. You came on last week to talk luck rankings. You hinted at a prop that you were looking at, and it fell right into range for you. You head into Trevor Lawrence. Please tell me more.
Yeah, we're going with the prop that I talked about on Wednesday, Green Dot Daily. Now, officially giving it out that we have a line. Trevor Lawrence over 20.5 completions. You can get that at -114. Look, I know Trevor Lawrence has only had 12 and 14 completions in his first 2 games, but everybody sees that and has bet this line down from 21.5 to 20.5. But Trevor Lawrence has averaged nearly 23 completions per game over the last 2 years. So you'd expect long-term that those two would be maybe an aberration. And a lot of it is his completion percentage has been down. His completion percentage over expectation is actually -10.5%, so under expectation by a lot. And the last 2 years, he's been just slightly below CPOE at -0.5%. So there's a lot of room for positive regression in his completion rate. Also, part of the reason his completion percentage is down isn't just versus expectation, but he's also been taking low percentage throws because his ADOT, his average depth of target, is around 11 yards. But for his career, he's thrown around 7.5 to 8 yards average depth of target. So the passes should trend more towards higher completion expectation as well, knowing he'll probably be throwing shorter in the long run, and definitely against the Bills, because the Bills have allowed a bottom 10 ADOT, meaning short passes, in both weeks 1 and 2. So expect Trevor Lawrence to have higher percentage completion attempts. Also, the Jags should be just more pass happy overall. Obviously, they're underdogs, but also their pass rate over expectation, -5.5%. So under expectation, actually. In the last 2 years, they've actually been +1.3%. So we should expect them to throw more as well. So more volume, more passing volume. Look, the Bills earlier this year allowed 21 completions to the run-heavy Arizona Cardinals and Kyler Murray, and they allowed 25 completions to the combination of Tua and Skyler for Miami. So I'm taking Trevor Lawrence over 20.5 completions.
Yeah, it feels like the Jags are on the precipice of a good game here. The Buffalo Bills, they let Miami drive down the field. Miami just was not able to get it in the end zone. Might be the opposite going for Lawrence. You'll hear from me as well on why I like Lawrence in general. I was targeting his yards. Think that you could even ladder it in general. I agree with you. I think the market is starting to be too low on Trevor Lawrence based on the first 2 weeks, but you look at how last season came out and the weapons he has around him. The Jaguars are not in bad shape whatsoever. We'll hear more from you guys on this game in general in just a bit over in Mykonos, but we got to talk Commanders and Bengals before you go. Sean, I'm going to kick it to you first. Bengals, a little over a touchdown favorite. It feels like, obviously the public's on their side. They haven't won a game. They're due for this big game. How are you handicapping this from a spread and total POV?
Yeah, so from the spread POV, I mean, this is another luck rankings matchup. The Bengals have been unlucky this year. But I share Nick's sentiment with Joe Burrow's wrist, where it's really hard to trust him right now. So I'm staying away from this side, but I certainly think, the Bengals -7.5 is probably the sharp side, and that's kind of where I'm going with my prop.
All right, so that's more from that in just a second on his end. But Nick, I'm going to kick it to you first. And listen, we just talked about the wrist injury of Joe Burrow. Sean's a little bit concerned about it. You are too, and we saw it last week against Kansas City. His ADOT has come down a bunch, and you're targeting Joe Burrow here for your prop in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the exact same wrist injury as Joe Burrow. His was worse than mine, but I definitely feel it to this day, 3.5 years later. So it's one that gets worse with usage. But to his prop, we're going to go Joe Burrow under 34.5 passing attempts. You can get that up -110. As Sean alluded to with the luck ranking, Cincinnati is the unlucky team. They're also the favored team. So both of those, being the favored team and being more likely to cover based off the luck rankings, should lead to a rushing game script. Cincinnati also this year has been 9.5% more pass heavy in terms of pass rate over expectation, but they were just 5.5% last year. So there's a little more room for, versus expectation to have some rushing attempts as well. And I would expect that to kind of bear out. I mean, we just talked about Burrow's wrist. It'd be really good for for Cincinnati to help protect that. Also, we've just overall seen a more rush-heavy NFL so far in 2024. Obviously, we talk about the two high defenses, and so teams have been taking advantage of that by running more. So I think there's room definitely for Cincinnati's pass rate over expectation to come down and be more rush-happy. I'd also rather take his attempts than his completions because Joe Burrow has some very drastic long versus short passing splits. He's been struggling with long passes, as we'd expect with his wrist, but he's been very good short passing. And Washington is 32nd in defensive DVOA versus the short pass so far this year. So we want that. We want Joe Burrow to be super efficient on these short passes, especially early in the game. Run that clock, complete all the passes. I don't care. It's totally fine if you throw it as long as you complete it. We want Cincinnati to get that early lead here. And then on the other side of the ball, the Commanders have been a run-heavy team. They've had more than half their plays this year be rushing attempts, thanks to a lot of scrambling from Jaden Daniels, in addition to their designed run attempts. And the Bet What Happens Live model that we have also likes Joe Burrow's under here as well.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how Burrow kind of progresses with this wrist injury. It's something to keep an eye on all the time. It's what shies, a lot of bettors are all over Jamar Chase's over on receiving yards, but he can't really throw it down the field. We saw the tight ends him kind of lead on last week. So taking the short plays, running the clock out. Sean mentioned the luck rankings favor the Bengals here. If they're up by a lot, they're not going to be passing the ball and using Joe Burrow's wrist a lot more. Sean, for your prop in this game as well, the emergence or the return of T. Higgins from injury kind of paired with Joe Burrow's wrist injury kind of plays into this one. So please tell me more.
So my prop for this game's Andre Iosivas under 25.5 receiving yards. You can get it at -110, but this really does piggyback with everything Nick just said. And I'm high on Iosivas as a talent. Last year, I was saying he's probably going to be their long-term replacement for T. Higgins. As a preseason degenerate myself, I've seen him tear up preseason. So I love him as a talent. But as you mentioned, T. Higgins is expected to make his season debut tonight after missing the first two games with a hamstring injury. And he practiced in full this week, and he was completely removed from the injury report. So I'm expecting he's good to go here. And when it comes to the Bengals, they've used 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets at a much higher rate this year. Last year, they used it just 16% of the time. This year, it's up to 35%, and they've had the third highest success rate with that formation. So I think with Higgins' return, that's really going to, lower Iosivas's potential playing time. Plus, Trenton Irwin, gotta love him, is still rotating with Iosivas quite a bit. So I think Iosivas's playing time will take a hit here. If not, he hasn't been drawing many targets. Just 13% of his routes run, he's drawn a target. So again, that's going to also take a hit with Higgins here. And he's not seeing passes downfield. His ADOT is just 7.9 yards downfield, and it's typically in the end zone. 2 of his 10 targets have been in the end zone, just 3.5 yards downfield. So anytime he's getting a target in the end zone, he doesn't have much field in front of him. So it kind of limits his ceiling when it comes to receiving yards. So I have his median closer to 20.5 here with about a 60% chance he stays under 25.5.
Yeah, we were talking off air being like, maybe the under yards touchdown that we tried to do last week with Mike Will could work for Iosivas, because you mentioned it. The multiple tight end sets, and you usually find Iosivas toward the end zone. The multiple tight end sets, they've been using it a lot to kind of counterbalance Joe Burrow's wrist injury. So totally makes sense. And that there's something you guys are starting to rewire my brain to think about unders. When I saw this prop, and I was like, holy crap, this is I can see this one totally. Versus me always wanting to bet on the overs. But before I let you guys go, Nick, we are having Bet What Happens Live today, right?
Absolutely. Doubleheader of Bet What Happens Live. Grant and I will be doing both Monday night football games. So excited for that. Okay.
So yeah, be sure to check on Bet What Happens Live at the halftime of both games. And obviously they're kind of staggered, so you'll have some time to breathe in between. But tune in for profit, because Nick and Grant have done a great job this season over on Bet What Happens Live. All right, Nick, Sean, grab your floaties, your sunscreen. You're going to Mykonos, my friends. We'll see you in just a bit.
All right. Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Another week, another glimpse at perfection here at Action Network. After Sean Koerner's 16-0 run, our very own Chris Raybon picked up the baton with a 7-0 record betting NFL Week 3. To give everyone a piece of the action, we're offering new Action Pro subscribers, $20 off the price of an annual subscription. All you have to do is go to actionnetwork.com/pro and use the promo code PERFECT, and you'll get instant access to instant notifications anytime Chris Raybon makes a pick. You'll also get access to our projections for NFL spreads, totals, and props for every game every single week. Once again, that's actionnetwork.com/pro with the promo code PERFECT. Sticking to the gridiron, though, here are the top 5 players in each Monday Night Football game. In terms of ticket percentages, of course, the most bet touchdown scorers for each game. Allen leads the way as far as odds go. James Cook, though, is the most bet touchdown scorer. Dating back to last season, though, Josh Allen had a rushing touchdown in 12 of 15 games. That's carrying over to this year, but he was scoreless last week against Miami. Is now the time. 4 of the 5 most bet TD scorers have come out of Buffalo. In that one, the lone Jag being Travis Etienne. On the opposite side, are we really surprised to see Jamar Chase #1? Bettors are hoping for a big day out of Chase in general, and the return of T. Higgins has firmly placed him inside the top 5 of tickets bet as well. It's also cool to see bettors attacking the Bengals defense and special teams. They're finding a way inside the top 5, but we mentioned touchdowns, and Gilles Gallant appears. Gilles, we're back for another edition of 4 Down Territory, but before I ask, usually it's just a one game on Monday or Thursday night. We have a double header here. How are you feeling? Are you ready to just sit down and just enjoy football for the next 5-6 hours?
Absolutely. And I think the main reason why I do kind of like the doubleheader is because sometimes when we get these one-off games, like the way that last Thursday was with the Jets-Patriots, or, just some of these matchups where we think it's a great matchup coming into the season, and then we get to week 3 and you're like, oh my God, this team is terrible. It's going to be awful in prime time. But at least these 4 teams, I feel like we could see some really good football tonight. So yeah, I'm excited to be able to watch both games.
Yeah, it's also nice. You can flick through the channels. The first game's at 7:30-ish. So it's earlier than having to sit down, at least Eastern time, and sit down and wait for Monday Night Football to come, because that's basically what I'm waiting for the entire day, is to sit down and relax and watch some football. But we have 4 Down Territory to get to. You're going to be on the island later. You got to go to Mykonos, so you're going to stick mostly to the Cincinnati game, as will I. I'm going to kick things off for first down here. And as a reminder, how the game works is every down you have to get longer and longer in odds go. I'm going to start us in plus money territory. None of that minus money crap, Gilles. Noah Brown, 25 plus receiving yards at plus 165. I think it's a great spot to buy Noah Brown. I wouldn't even be opposed to laddering his props here. He made his Commanders debut last week, and it was because he had returned from injury, then was cut by Houston, and then picked up by Washington. You need a couple of weeks to kind of get situated. In 28% of the snaps, he hauled in 56 receiving yards, had the big 34-yard reception late that secured the win against the New York Giants. So I'm expecting this snap count, this workload to increase for Brown. I think he's going to kind of find himself as that number 2 in Washington's offense ahead of Diami and McCaffrey. And just as an example of how good Noah Brown can be, last year as a depth piece in Houston, he went over 25 plus receiving yards in 6 of 9 games where he played over a quarter of the snaps. I'm expecting, an increase to the 28%, but even when he does that number, Noah Brown has been succeeding. So I like the alt line here rather than just taking, the 15, 16 and a half in the market, and wouldn't even be opposed to 50 plus. But Gilles, I mentioned I like laddering Noah Brown. You like a touchdown score in this one on the same side, but you're going away from the receiving core.
Yeah, and it wasn't anything because of not the belief in Noah Brown. I think just what's kind of confusing me a little bit is right now when you look at the wide receiver 2 touchdown odds, because I was trying to figure out who's the wide receiver 2 after Terry McLaurin. They're all pretty much priced around the same, around plus 650 to plus 700. So I think the yardage angle is the best way to go with somebody like Noah Brown. But for a touchdown for the Commanders, I think you got to go with Brian Robinson at plus 175. He didn't score last week, but again, not for a lack of trying, because he had 6 red zone carries, just couldn't punch it in, and leads the team with 8 red zone carries through 2 games. That game where he had 6 red zone carries, that was against the Giants, where he had 133 rushing yards on 17 carries. And this Bengals defense, I'm a little worried about whether or not they're going to be able to stop the run tonight, because they are missing their 2 starting defensive tackles in BJ Hill and Sheldon Rankins. They were already allowing the 5th most rushing yards coming into this game through 2 weeks. And again, with Jaden Daniels, he has yet to throw a passing touchdown through 2 games. I'm not really sure what we're going to get out of the passing game for the Commanders, and which is making it hard to determine, like, do you go with Terry McLaurin? Do you go with Zach Ertz? So for me, I'd rather just bank on Brian Robinson to carry the load. And at plus 175, I love that price.
Yeah, it really feels like if you're going to get a Commanders guy, getting someone who's on the field the majority of the snaps, Brian Robinson is, and a guy that will probably be in, whether it's a losing game script or a winning game script, Brian Robinson should be. It feels like a smart way to go, especially it's him or Jaden Daniels, I think, to kind of punch one in. But Brian Robinson, plus 175 is great value. My second play, we're going to go to the other game because, Jill, you're doing Action Island. Well, guess who's not giving out 2 picks in Action Island? Me. So I can do whatever I want here. I'm going to go north of 175.
Man. You do whatever you got to do.
Yeah, listen, I got to do this because I look at this game and I'm like, ugh, to the Cincinnati Bengals one, except for Noah Brown. So I'm going to go with Trevor Lawrence, 250 plus passing yards. We heard Nick earlier talk about how Trevor Lawrence should have some positive regression. The Jags as a whole should. You look at Trevor Lawrence's numbers, a 51% completion percentage this year. Last year, it was closer to 66%. So that number is going to positively regress in the end run because it's not like the Jaguars receiving room has gotten any worse. Despite Ridley leaving, they brought in Gabe Davis, and they brought in Brian Thomas, who's been incredible too. You look back at the numbers, Trevor Lawrence, 250 plus in 7 of the last 9 games of last season. Obviously not been the case this season, a little bit of a slow out of the gate start from Jacksonville, but I think it's a good buy spot on T-Law. I think the Jags line, the wide receiver room is more than enough talented to keep this game close. And, they're 5.5, 6-point underdogs. It should be a negative game script. So Lawrence should be passing a lot more. I think he's going to be able to go over this number. I wouldn't even be opposed to laddering Trevor Lawrence here. What are your thoughts on this game before we move on to 4th down?
Yeah, I think you hit the nose on the head there with the completions and the yardage for Lawrence, especially if they are in a trailing game script. I'm a little worried just the fact that he doesn't have that safety blanket of Evan Ingram, who I will never bet for a touchdown score, but does rack up a ton of yards. And I think that's the one thing, though. But I am encouraged as well how Brenton Strange looked last week. I think he could be another target over the middle. And if we start seeing those bombs down to Brian Thomas, I mean, spoiler alert, I really like Brian Thomas to score a touchdown today. Then that yardage could rack up very quickly. So I think, again, in a trailing script here, Trevor Lawrence should be able to get the 300. It seems a very modest line. I think it's just more of a reflection on what we've seen through the first 2 weeks for the Jaguars offense.
Yeah, it really feels like a bit of an overreaction. North of 2-1 on just 250 passing yards. It's not like we're talking, 275 or 300 here. I also like Brian Thomas for what it's worth. I did a little SGP for Action Network on this game, but we got to go back onto the tracks. I took us offline for a bit. Let's get situated back on the tracks, Jill. 4th down, you got to go higher than 2-1. An anytime touchdown in Washington and Cincinnati. Please tell me where you're going.
All right, we're going to go with the tight end, but not Zach Ertz. We're going to go with Mike Gesicki at plus 300. So when you look through, we talked about this when we were looking at tight ends last week playing against the Bengals. You could make a case that Mike Gesicki should have a touchdown in both games so far. He's seen 13 targets through 2 games. And Nick Giffen, our friend, he talks about this a lot about Joe Burrow and the lack of range with his wrist injury. It's really limiting his throws downfield. His ADOTs per throw is the lowest it's ever been in his career for Joe Burrow. So I'm very high on the Bengals passing game. And I do expect Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to get theirs. I mean, at least on this Commanders secondary, he's given up 6 touchdowns to wide receivers so far. But I can't overlook how involved Mike Gesicki has been in this offense. And so I prefer the tight end to finally get his first score of the year. And I love the odds at plus 300.
Yeah, it really feels like a great buy spot. You mentioned it. Gesicki has really been such a bright spot for Cincinnati in the early going, and it's so nice to have a safety valve. You mentioned Lawrence not having the safety valve of Evan Ingram. Well, Burrow has that with Mike Gesicki, and yes, he has Chase, and yes, he has Higgins, but it makes sense. Lower ADOT, more checkdowns, more Gesicki, which we saw last week. He completely dominated, and then the week before, he probably should have had a touchdown against the New England Patriots. They said after the fact that he should have. So 3-1 for Mike Gesicki, anytime touchdown, and what could be, a fireworks high-scoring game. I definitely like this one. So just a reminder for the 4-down territory, we started out plus 165, Noah Brown, then Gilles, 2nd down with B-Rob to get into the end zone, plus 175. I went a little off course, took a jersey slide to the Jaguars game. Trevor Lawrence, 250 plus at 2-1. And then Gilles, rounding us out with a 3-1 Mike Gesicki anytime touchdown. All right, Gilles, you got to get your sunscreen, your sunglasses. We're heading to Mykonos in just a second, so I'll see you again soon.
All right, see you soon on the island.
And let's keep the discussion going surrounding the Washington Commanders and Cincinnati Bengals and take a look at the most bet props ahead of Monday Night Football. Bettors remain stubborn on the Ja'Marr Chase train, with his over being the most bet prop despite being held under in both games to start the season. The Bengals defense has been gashed through the ground in the opening 2 weeks, and bettors have jumped aboard the Brian Robinson Jr. Express as a result. His yards and rushing attempts sit inside the top 5. Do we see fireworks? And that's a perfect question to ask Billy Ward, junior predictive analyst over at Action Network. Billy, you do a same game parlay every Monday and Thursday, and then you come on GDD to help us concoct an SGP. Brian Robinson Jr., one of the most bet props, both rushing attempts, rushing yards. How do you feel about that? Is the public, or I guess just bettors in general, on the right track?
Yeah, not one of the ones we're going to talk about in our parlay, but in the article I mentioned his rushing and receiving together. I like that one better. We're showing a slight value on both of those individually, so you cover the bases both ways. A little bit surprising the usage out of Brian Robinson. He's gotten the exact same amount of targets as Austin Eckler, way more carries, almost 3-1 in terms of carries. So yeah, I'm bullish on Brian Robinson in general, and also the over, which we'll talk about to start our parlay.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, right? Are we going to see fireworks? Can we see some offense on both ends of the ball? We know how elite and dynamic Daniels can be. And of course, we know Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow. So kick us off, first leg of the SGP.
Yeah, like I alluded to, we're starting with the over 46.5. Kind of a perfect situation here. You know, the Bengals are getting T. Higgins back, so their passing offense should be better. Washington was 32nd in DVOA last season against the pass. They are 32nd through 2 games here. They have not really improved that at all. They're the best matchup for passing attacks. And then on the other side, Jaden Daniels has been pretty efficient. He's got a 75% completion rate, 7.7 yards per attempt. Both, average, slightly above average numbers when you factor all that in. Hasn't thrown a touchdown pass yet. You kind of expect that's going to regress, which also leads into one of our picks later. But given, the matchup and the way this game's going to go, if Cincinnati's putting up points, Daniels is throwing more, we should see fireworks.
Right, you would expect, and I was talking to you offline about this, like, is, McCaffrey a good touchdown bet? Is long shot Noah Brown maybe even good? Because is Jaden Daniels going to start throwing the ball, finding the end zone more? Hopefully that is the case, and you mentioned kind of seeing the over, more fireworks. I'm going to go a little bit square here for the second leg, but I really like this play, and it's one of the most bet touchdown props, and I still don't care. Ja'Marr Chase at plus money, I'm going to take it. He hasn't done it at all in the first 2 weeks of the season, and the Commanders, they're dead last in DVOA against the pass. Now, look, I'm not saying go bet his over on receiving yards, because I am concerned, quite frankly, about Joe Burrow and his wrist and how far he can throw the ball downfield. But when you get into the red zone, you're going to look at your best options. We saw Rodgers get Garrett Wilson involved. It's only a matter of time for Burrow to do the same thing with Chase. The return of T. Higgins should at least alleviate some attention because T's a big-bodied red zone threat. So people are going to be on T. Higgins as well. So I just think it's one of those, like, if not now, win. It's a great matchup. We saw him torch them before. Close range, Ja'Marr Chase, plus money, anytime touchdown. Count me in. Billy, you're going a little bit further down the road, though, on the Commander side of things. You kind of alluded to Daniels finding the end zone. Who do you like on that side of things?
Yeah, before I jump in on that real quick on the Chase thing, if you wanted to get real crazy, go under his yards and his anytime touchdown, because that's going to give you a huge payout. T. Higgins coming back is kind of a double-edged sword. He's going to draw some of the targets, but also Chase has been double-teamed and had defenses shaded his way all year, which won't happen. So, do they keep him under the yardage because Higgins is getting catches, but Chase is still in the end zone? It's a long shot, but you'll get a huge payout on that. So just if anyone really wants to take this one to the next level. We're still getting pretty juicy, though, with where I'm going. That's Terry McLaurin, anytime touchdown. As, we talked about offline, I said you could kind of sprinkle on any of these Commanders receivers anytime touchdown, and I think you'd be plus EV. He's got to throw a touchdown pass eventually at some point. He's been too efficient. I feel like touchdowns, to an extent, are a little bit random in terms of if you pick up X amount of yards, you should get Y number of touchdowns in the long run. And McLaurin's the number one passing option in the offense. We're expecting a high-scoring game. We're expecting Cincinnati to put up points. That keeps Washington's throwing. And like you said, if not now, win. If not Terry, then who in this Commanders offense?
Yeah, it's literally back Chase and Terry. It's like, if not now, when are they going to do it? The game's kind of aligning perfectly. Cincinnati should be able to move the ball down the field. Washington's going to find themselves in passing situations as they do often behind trailing game script. Terry McLaurin is obviously that number one guy. And, you know, I like your idea of kind of sprinkling on other Commanders. And listen, guys, for the guys, people at home, the girls and guys watching at home, if you want to sprinkle on other guys, you could swap out Terry McLaurin for, you know, Noah Brown or whatever, vice versa on the Bengals side of things. The leg that we like to see fireworks today and over. And just a quick recap, Terry, Jamar, and the over, all three together over at Bet365 is a 10-1 payout. And then if you want to get crazy, add in Billy's legs, which you can read over on actionnetwork.com about his SGP, the Brian Robinson rushing and receiving over, the Jamar Chase under on yards. You put that all together, that five-legger is, you know, way higher, probably north of 20, 25-1, if not higher than that. So Billy Ward, appreciate you, my friend. Hopefully a couple of sparklers are lit and we can see, you know, at least some sort of fireworks tonight.
Yeah, after some low-scoring games over the weekend, it'll be nice to have that.
Please. And just a reminder, in honor of Chris Raybon's 7-0 record betting NFL this week 3, you can use the promo code PERFECT to get $20 off the annual price, or the price of an annual Action Pro subscription. Just visit actionnetwork.com/pro and use the code PERFECT for $20 off the price of an annual subscription. I hope you all brought your sunnies and flip-flops. It's time to get tropical here on Green Dot Daily. And I said we're just a quick red-eye away from Mykonos. Well, before we actually get to enjoy our vacation here on the island, we got to give you a same-game parlay between the Jaguars and the Bills. And of course, I can't do this alone, so I have to bring in fellow experts. You heard from them earlier, Nick Giffen, Sean Koerner, Gilles Gallant, all three of them joining me now in Action Island as we do a same game parlay for this Monday Night Football. Just a reminder on what we will be doing here on Action Island if this is your first time. Each panelist here, Nick, Sean, and Gilles, will give out 2 of their favorite bets of this game. We'll vote one in, vote one off. The end result is a same game parlay to kind of root along for while you're sitting down enjoying this double header. All right, guys, listen, we heard from you earlier about your favorite bets in all the games together. Well, now we're focusing in on Jacksonville and Buffalo. And Nick Giffen, you're starting us off. What are your 2 bets for the island?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with Josh Allen. I know Sean gave his under on passing yards, but I'm going to go with Josh Allen to throw an interception in this one. He has not thrown an interception this year, so he has had 5 passes defended, has not had an interception. Usually the NFL rate is about 1 in every 5 passes defended ends up as an interception. So a little lucky there for Josh Allen. And on the flip side, the Jags have been the unluckiest team in the NFL in that category with 9 passes defended, no interceptions. So their pass defended rate is right around league average. 9 versus the number of attempts they've had has been right around 13% overall attempts they've faced have been defended. So very unlucky for the Jags to not have an interception, and a little bit lucky for Josh Allen to not have an interception. So he's throwing one tonight. For my second pick, Charlie, I got to go with the luck rankings. Jacksonville Jaguars plus 5.5. I wrote about it midweek. Still like it there. Nothing's changed there. 65% in week 3 for the luck rankings. Let's go.
Yeah, and a very interception-prone Josh Allen hasn't thrown one yet this season. You laid it out. A little bit of a decorative statement saying he will throw one tonight. And then the Jags, of course, the luck rankings. How can you really work against that? All right, Gilles, Sean, we have to get to voting. So get down your markers and let's get to voting. All right, we have Josh Allen interception or the Jaguars spread. Guys, 3, 2, 1. Jags, both Jags. All right. That means the Jags are the first leg of the same game parlay. I like this one. I think it's a good foundation. We've heard all week about the luck rankings and the success that comes with it. So I think this is the perfect way to start us off. All right, Gilles. the anytime touchdown guru. Where are we headed on the island?
For sure. So I got a touchdown prop on both sides. So on the Jaguars side, I love Brian Thomas Jr. to get a touchdown tonight. He's around plus 250, plus 255. He caught a touchdown in week 1, has been the deep threat for the Jags through 2 games. He's crushing zone coverage so far. The Bills run zone at a top 10 rate through 2 games. And according to PFF, the Bills also ranked last in defensive success rate when playing zone coverage. So if the Jags passing attack, which Nick has alluded to get more completions from Trevor Lawrence, if it finally gets back on track, I like Thomas to get his second touchdown of the season. The other prop I like, though, is on the Bills side. I like Keon Coleman to have a touchdown today, get his first of the season. He's around plus 310. I just think he's the best matchup versus this Jags secondary. The Jags have played man coverage at a top rate through 2 weeks, and he's the most targeted wide receiver by Josh Allen when the Bills have faced man defenses, and he's playing the most snaps. He's the most routes run of any Bills receiver. Last week, he didn't really get targeted because the Bills were up so fast early that they didn't really need him. So I project a bit of a closer game this week. So Keon Coleman or Brian Thomas Jr. are the 2 touchdown props to choose from.
I really like BTJ. I just think he's on the precipice of breaking out. And like we saw last week, he hauled in a 66-yard reception. The week before that, had a touchdown. He's the real deal. So Jacksonville Jaguars receiver becoming the star there for him to score a touchdown. And then Keon Coleman, it'll be interesting. He's due for an anytime touchdown. It's one of those things that you might be watching late, hoping for it, and then he has him wide open in the end zone, and Josh Allen just like pump fakes and runs right into it as he always does, which is kind of aggravating. But Keon Coleman or BTJ to score an anytime touchdown, guys. Let's get to voting. All right. Do we go with the plus money Keon Coleman against the Jags, or we go with another Jaguars prop? Let's show them, Nick and Sean. 3, 2, 1. BTJ. What does that say? Randy Moss Jr. Okay, Sean. A little decorative statement there. What?
That's my comp for Brian Thomas Jr.
I know.
Randy Moss, baby.
You were very high on him before the season, I know. You gave out his over on touchdowns caught. Very high on him entering week 1 as well. So we're sticking to Brian Thomas Jr. or Randy Moss Jr., whichever one you want to see fit, to pair with the Jaguars plus 5.5 for our second leg of the same game parlay. All right, Koerner, or, the GOAT Jr., I guess. Take us home. Round us out with your 2 props.
Well, first off, I'm going to go with the prop I gave out at the top of the hour. Dalton Kincaid under, it's down to 36.5 yards. Still like the under there, but like I said earlier, this is going to be a game where the Bills lean on the run. They've been very run heavy ever since Joe Brady took over as offensive coordinator. And the Jags play man coverage at the highest rate in the league. So Josh Allen, his scramble rate goes up quite a bit against man coverage. So I think he's going to use his legs even more. And Dalton Kincaid has struggled against man coverage in his career. So a lot of different things going against Kincaid here, not to mention that his average depth of target is minus 0.3 yards downfield. So even if he racks up a few catches here, it's still going to be pretty tough for him to clear this number. And my second prop is pretty correlated with that. It's Josh Allen under 234.5 passing yards. Pretty much what I just said. The Jags are a man-heavy defense, so I think we're going to see Josh Allen lean on his scrambling, his rushing ability even more. And even your boy, Charlie, James Cook, they're going to lean on him heavily again here as well. So, and Josh Allen's, his average depth of target this year is just 7.4 yards downfield, the lowest in his career. So he's not, throwing it downfield as much. He doesn't have Gabe Davis there anymore. Hashtag revenge game tonight for him. So I like him to stay under his passing yard prop as well.
Yeah, James Cook was giving me deja vu to last season just when it was a blowout and then Tua went down. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I need 2 yards. I was freaking out texting Sean, but he came through for the fellas, came home with the rushing and receiving victory for me against Miami. All right, guys, so Josh Allen, under passing yards, or Dalton Kincaid, under receiving yards. Nick, Gilles, let's get to voting. Do we fade the man they coin as the best quarterback that's not named Patrick Mahomes, or do we fade Dalton Kincaid? 3, 2, 1. Allen, a clean sweep to round us out on the SGP. Josh Allen under passing yards. I think it makes sense, Sean. I think you perfectly let out a great argument. Josh Allen's going to use his legs. It's not like it's going to be even if it's a blowout, he won't be using his legs, but then he won't be passing the ball. They'll just be handing it off. And plus, we've kind of seen, even beyond James Cook, the run game of Buffalo has been pretty efficient thus far. So, plus, I couldn't go against my fantasy team. I need Dalton Kincaid to do well here. So that's why I went with Josh Allen. But just a recap quickly before we say goodbye of what the SGP is. Jaguars plus 5.5 was Nick Giffen's leg that we voted in, and then a clean sweep on BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr., an anytime touchdown pairing with the Jaguars' success. And then a Josh Allen under on passing yards from Sean Koerner. You put those three together, that's north of 10-1, about 12-1 over at DraftKings. Of course, the odds can change. Of course, you can pick and choose how you see fit. Do you want to go to, say, you want to throw in Keon Coleman touchdown? Or you said, you know what, I agree with that. I want to take Kincaid's under as well. This is the beauty of a same game parlay and why every single expert here comes on to give out 2 legs. All right, so the quick recap. Jaguars, BTJ, Allen under, about 12-1. Nick, do we like this parlay? How are we feeling?
Yeah, well, when you were saying Allen, it sounded like a law firm there, right? But I think the judgment there is we're going to hit this one. I love it. I think this is great.
There we go. The beautiful wordplay that there is. All right, Nick, Gilles, Sean, you guys got to get right back on. Enjoy the vacation in Mykonos, but we need you back here on Thursday, so I'll see you then soon. And now it's time. I can't let you guys go without me going toe-to-toe with the wheel. And if you want to think about how last week went, or last prime time that is, we'll say that the wheel on Thursday did not have its way. I improved to 3-1 with my best bet. And the wheel, yet again, Aaron Rodgers, INT, that never came to fruition. He was phenomenal. So again, now I am 3-1, the under coming in pretty easily. The wheel 1-3. So we're gonna have to get a best bet for this Monday Night Football doubleheader. Obviously, you can see the names here. We're going Buffalo Bills against Jacksonville Jaguars, and kind of the trend, if you've been watching the show, is this is a good buy low spot on the Jaguars, so that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm taking Trevor Lawrence over 219.5 passing yards. I love this number. He's not going to be making 51% of all his attempts throughout the entire season. It's going to go back up to that, 2/3, 60+% number. Positive regression is coming for Trevor Lawrence. He's got a talented receiving room. Yes, Gabe Davis is now in. Calvin Ridley is out. But then we have a guy by the name of Brian Thomas Jr. coming in as well. So I really like this spot. Dating back to last season, in 7 of his last 9 games, 2 games this year, 7 games before that, he's had 220+ passing yards in 7 of those 9. This is just a horrible number, in my opinion. Positive regression coming. The Jags should be in a slightly trailing game script. More pass attempts, more yards. So give me T-Law over 219.5. And now it's time. The beautiful wheel, or ugly wheel, I should say, because he's my competitor, is going to spin. Christian Kirk over 42.5 receiving yards. Well, I guess we're kind of going hand in hand. It's vice versa based on the Falcons-Eagles game last time where I took Drake London over receiving yards, and the wheel took Kirk Cousins, and it ended up beating me in the end. Christian Kirk hopefully does not really factor into T-Law unless we both win, going off into the sunset together. I'm fine with the wheel getting one as long as T-Law can get one as well. But so your reminder, me, T-Law over 219.5, the wheel over 42.5 receiving yards. We'll see how that one plays out. And just a reminder that any pick we give out here on the show, like the one you just heard from me versus the wheel, you can easily reference by following us in the award-winning Action Network app under the handle @green.daily. We keep track so you don't have to. That's going to be all for this fine Monday. Go enjoy the doubleheader of football. It starts in just a few hours, so get set and do not move from your spot. You're going to want to watch both these games. I'll be back here tomorrow, 3 Eastern on the Action YouTube channel and the Action app. We'll still have NFL discussion, a little MLB with Sean Zerillo, and much more. I'll see you all tomorrow.